How is it going, everybody? Daner here with North Central Coins, and welcome back to another exciting episode of the most rare and valuable coins in Canada. Today we're going to be taking a look at one of the most mysterious, valuable, and virtually unknown nickels in Canadian numismatics, the 1942 pattern 5-cent coin, also referred to as DC-25. Now, whether you're an experienced collector or you're just starting out your coin journey, most are familiar with the iconic 12-sided nickels that started showing up in the year 1942. But what if I told you that there was a secret pattern version that came before them? A coin never meant to end up in public hands, struck in pure nickel. And the chances of finding one of these coin roll hunting in your pocket change or change jar are slim to nil, but not impossible. And if you did manage to find one of these and identify it correctly, it could be worth tens of thousands of dollars. This elusive coin was produced in incredibly small numbers by the Canadian Mint during World War II as part of a test to introduce a new coin shape, and nearly all of them were meant to be destroyed, but a handful somehow managed to escape into private collections, making them one of the ultimate holy grails of Canadian nickels. In today's video, we're going to explore the history and origins behind this ultra rare coin, the wartime conditions that led to its creation, and most importantly, how you can identify one of these if you're ever lucky enough to come across one. We will also go over this coin's current value today in various specimen grades and why collectors are willing to spend big bucks to get their hands on one. Before we do get into this, I would really appreciate if you guys would smash that thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and also ring that bell notification so you can stay up to date with my new videos as they are being released. And be sure to stick around until the end of the video so you can find just how much one of these elusive nickels could be worth in today's market. And then without any further ado, what do you say we get right into it and discuss the 1942 pattern 5-cent Canadian nickel? Let's get it, guys. Most Canadian coin collectors are familiar with the iconic 12-sided nickels that began appearing in the year 1942, but very few know the story of an incredibly rare prototype that came before them, a coin that was never meant to be seen by public eyes and that almost no one has actually held in person. This coin is known as the 1942 pattern 5-cent coin, or by its Charlton catalog designation, DC-25. This elusive test piece was created by the Canadian Mint as part of an experimental effort to revolutionize Canadian coinage during one of the most tumultuous periods in modern history, World War II. One of the key reasons for the Canadian Mint switching to a 12-sided shape for nickels in 1942 was to prevent confusion between coin denominations. During World War II, nickel as a metal was urgently needed for the war effort, so the Mint replaced it with tombac, a copper-zinc alloy that had a golden bronze color, almost identical to Canadian pennies at the time. To avoid the public, bank tellers, or merchants mistaking tombac nickels for 1-cent coins, the Mint introduced the distinctive 12-sided or dodecagonal shape. This new design helped Canadians quickly distinguish nickels from pennies by feel and appearance. Even after tombac was phased out in 1944 and replaced with chrome-plated steel, the 12-sided shape remained until the year 1963 when Canadian nickels finally returned to their round form. At first glance, the 1942 pattern nickel could resemble the familiar tombac nickel that entered circulation the same year, but in reality it is a completely different coin. This piece was struck in pure nickel rather than the copper zinc alloy known as tombac, and it was never intended for public distribution or to be released in collector sets. The 1942 pattern nickel DC-25 was produced in vanishingly small numbers solely to evaluate the feasibility of a 12-sided coin shape. This dodecagonal form would go on to define the look of Canadian nickels for the next 21 years, making the pattern coin somewhat of an origin piece in Canadian numismatics. To fully understand why this pattern nickel was created, we need to go back to the year 1942. At this time, Canada was fully engaged in World War II, and nickel as a metal was deemed as a strategic war resource. It was needed in large quantities for use in armor plating, aircraft engines, and other military-grade materials. The Canadian government, in partnership with the Canadian Mint, began phasing out nickel from coinage in favor of more abundant and less strategically valuable metals. The first nickels issued for general circulation in 1942 were round versions that were struck in nickel, and these were issued early in the year before the changeover to tombac. And then eventually, the 12-sided tombac nickels began to make their way into circulation later in 1942 as well. But before the mint could move forward with mass producing this new 12-sided tombac coin, it had to conduct internal tests to ensure that the new shape could be struck reliably, used effectively in vending machines, and was generally accepted by the Canadian public. The mint needed a prototype, a test piece with the proposed new shape, but from the original nickel material to evaluate how the new design would perform under real-world conditions. And that is how these 1942 pattern nickels came into existence. The pattern nickel DC-25 is notable for several reasons that elevate it far beyond an ordinary collector piece. First and foremost, it is one of Canada's earliest and rarest pattern coins. These types of coins are generally produced in extremely limited numbers and are used only internally at mints to test the designs, alloys, and shapes before they go into full production. Unlike the tombac 12-sided nickels that did reach circulation, this coin retained the original nickel composition, resulting in a silvery appearance as opposed to the golden bronze hue of the tombac coins. These pattern pieces were not meant to be saved or collected. They were intended for internal evaluation only, and the vast majority were likely destroyed once the testing was concluded. However, a few examples, possibly fewer than a dozen, somehow escaped destruction. Whether through employee souvenir keeping, mishandling, or intentional preservation, these coins found their way into private collections or institutional archives, where they have since become mythical treasures in Canadian numismatics. If you ever come across a strange-looking 1942 Canadian nickel, here's how you might miraculously recognize one of these pattern coins. First, you want to take a look at the shape. The coin must be dodecagonal, so it will have 12 distinct flat edges. This dodecagonal shape was introduced in 1942, but was only used in circulation for the tombac nickel. You then want to take a look at the metal composition and color of the coin. Unlike the golden tone of the tombac nickels, the pattern version is struck in nickel, which will give it a silver hue similar to the round nickels in 1942. You then want to check the weight and size. This coin will weigh 5.5 grams and will measure 23.62 millimeters in diameter. Due to its ultra-limited production and high historical significance, the 1942 pattern nickel commands exceptionally high valuables at auction. Even lower grade examples are extremely coveted, but those in specimen 62 condition or better can bring in over $10,000. Some in high grade conditions, like SP65, have fetched prices approaching or even exceeding $20,000 Canadian. One thing that you have to keep in mind is that virtually none of these coins are accessible to the average collector. Most known examples are tucked away in museum collections or held tightly by elite collectors or investors. It's estimated that somewhere between 10 to 12 examples exist in private hands, making this one of the rarest and most desirable 5-cent coins ever produced in Canada. Even though most collectors, coin roll hunters, or numismatists will never encounter this coin in person, the 1942 pattern nickel represents a critical turning point in Canadian minting history. It not only marks the transition to the iconic 12-sided nickel, a design that would define the denomination for over 2 decades, but it also showcases the kind of wartime adaptability that shaped Canadian industry and innovation during the 1940s. Coins like the 1942 test piece DC-25 remind us that numismatics aren't just about collecting money. It's about collecting stories, moments in history, and forgotten artifacts. So if you are ever lucky enough to encounter a strange-looking 1942 nickel, perhaps in a dusty old coin box, a misidentified estate lot, or coin roll hunting, take a look closely because you might just be staring at a 6-figure piece of Canadian coinage history. If you do think you have found one of these and it is legitimate, I suggest you get it certified immediately by a trusted third-party grading service like ICCS, PCGS, or NGC. For a coin this rare, authentication isn't just recommended, it's absolutely essential. Online auction sites are rife with Canadian counterfeit coins, and this is one that I could easily see being faked or sold on one of these sites. So if you do ever find a Holy Grail or one-of-a-kind coin, I definitely suggest that you do your due diligence and inspect the coin closely before you go to the trouble of even getting a second opinion. Now, what do you guys think about the 1942 12-sided test nickel? What would you do if you ever found one of these, or if you ever have found any of the coins that I discussed in this video? Please let me know down in the comments. I would love to know. Also, I would really appreciate if you guys would smash that thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and also ring that bell notification so you can stay up to date with my new content as it is being released. But I think that is pretty much going to do it for this one, folks. So until the next one, everybody, peace out and have a good one, y'all.